The world has long been fascinated with objects said to carry curses. From ancient relics to modern trinkets, humans are quick to assign supernatural significance to strange patterns of coincidence. Among the most chilling of these stories is that of the Crying Boy painting, a mass-produced piece of art that gained notoriety not for its beauty, but for the inexplicable string of disasters connected to it. The legend of the cursed painting emerged in the 1980s in the United Kingdom and quickly spread, becoming a staple of modern folklore. It is the story of a seemingly harmless image, a portrait of a tear-streaked child, that somehow became associated with fires, destruction, and eerie survival. The Crying Boy paintings were originally mass-produced prints sold widely across Europe in the 1950s and 1960s. They were inexpensive, readily available in department stores, and became especially popular among working-class families in Britain. Most of the paintings were created by an Italian artist known as Giovanni Bragolin, although some works are attributed to other painters such as Bruno Amadio, who was said to have painted similar sentimental portraits of weeping children. The image typically depicted a young boy with large, sorrowful eyes and a single tear rolling down his cheek, often painted with striking realism. For many buyers, the paintings symbolized compassion, innocence, or empathy. But in time, the very traits that made the image so compelling, the lifelike expression of grief and pain, began to inspire unease. Hanging such a sorrowful image in one's living room carried a sense of heaviness. Guests sometimes commented on how unsettling the portraits were, and stories began circulating that the images brought bad luck. Yet it wasn't until decades later that these whispers exploded into full-blown panic. The first documented link between the Crying Boy painting and fires came in September 1985, when a major British tabloid, The Sun, ran a sensational headline, "Blazing Curse of the Crying Boy." The article reported that a series of unexplained house fires across Yorkshire and other parts of the UK had one bizarre detail in common. While entire homes had been reduced to ashes, the Crying Boy paintings always seemed to survive. Firefighters responding to the blazes were stunned to find that amid scorched ruins, the paintings, sometimes singed at the edges but intact, were eerily preserved. One case described a couple whose home was destroyed, leaving nothing but rubble, except for their Crying Boy painting, which was found lying face down in the debris, untouched by flames. In another case, the painting was found hanging neatly on a charred wall, the only recognizable item left in the room. Firemen, when interviewed, confirmed that this pattern repeated itself with strange regularity. Soon, the press dubbed the painting cursed, and the legend began to spread like wildfire, quite literally. The Sun's reporting ignited public hysteria. Readers who owned the painting were suddenly fearful that their homes might be next. Letters poured into newspapers from families claiming they too had experienced misfortune, accidents, or mysterious fires after acquiring the painting. Some claimed the painting had fallen from walls without explanation. Others said pets avoided the image, and still others swore that the painting's eyes seemed to follow them around the room. The fear grew so strong that many people rushed to rid themselves of their Crying Boy prints. Some burned them, others threw them into rivers, and still others handed them over to the press. In fact, The Sun capitalized on the frenzy by organizing a public bonfire in which hundreds of the paintings were ceremoniously destroyed. The event drew crowds, and newspapers eagerly snapped photographs of the paintings going up in flames. Ironically, some onlookers whispered that the paintings would never truly burn, though they were, of course, consumed like any ordinary print. Like all enduring urban legends, the story of the Crying Boy painting grew with each retelling. Soon, a darker origin tale was attached to the artwork. According to one popular version, the boy in the painting was an orphan from Madrid, whose parents had perished in a house fire. Bergolin, the artist, was said to have taken pity on the child and painted his likeness. However, wherever the boy went, fires followed. Some claim that the boy himself had been cursed, and that his sorrow was captured in the painting. Another tale alleged that the child was abused by the painter, and that his tears immortalized his anguish, which then cursed the artwork. A particularly sinister version suggested that the boy had died in a fire shortly after being painted, and that his spirit was trapped within the painting. From then on, every reproduction carried the curse. Skeptics pointed out that these tales had no solid evidence, and most were traced back to gossip or newspaper embellishments. Still, the legends gave the painting a chilling backstory that made it all the more feared. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Crying Boy curse was the testimony of firefighters themselves. Several claim to have personally witnessed the phenomenon of the painting's surviving fires unscathed. One even went on record suggesting that firefighters were warned not to keep such prints in their homes, as they seemed unlucky. This professional endorsement of the curse only added fuel to the fire of public belief. However, skeptics pointed out that there could be a rational explanation. The Crying Boy prints were not traditional oil paintings, but rather mass-produced prints on hardboard, coated with a layer of varnish. Some fire experts suggested that the varnish made the prints unusually fire-resistant, and that in the chaos of a house fire, it wasn't unthinkable for such objects to survive, especially if they fell face down and were shielded from direct flames. Still, the persistence of the phenomenon across multiple fires left many unconvinced that mere chance was at work. Part of what made the Crying Boy legend so powerful was the image itself. A crying child, painted with haunting realism, evokes strong emotions in viewers. Psychologists argue that when people already feel uneasy about an image, they are more likely to associate negative events with it. This is known as confirmation bias. Once the Crying Boy was labeled as cursed, any misfortune experienced by owners became connected in their minds to the painting. Fires and accidents are unfortunately common, but the human brain craves patterns, and so the image became a scapegoat for random tragedy. Furthermore, the hysteria of the 1980s was amplified by media sensationalism. The Sun, notorious for bold and exaggerated headlines, knew that a cursed painting story would sell, and it did. Even people who had never owned the painting became enthralled by the tale, sharing it at parties, in pubs, and in workplaces. The Crying Boy had become more than a painting. It was a cultural phenomenon. Since the 1980s, the legend of the Crying Boy painting has persisted in ghost stories, documentaries, and online forums. Paranormal investigators occasionally revisit the tale, testing whether the paintings are truly fireproof or whether the curse is psychological. The painting has inspired horror stories, short films, and even video games that play upon the unsettling concept of cursed artwork. Collectors, paradoxically, began to seek out Crying Boy prints specifically because of their cursed reputation. Some people delight in owning supposedly haunted objects, and so the paintings, once destroyed en masse, regained a cult following. Today, they can still be found in antique shops, online marketplaces, and occasionally in the homes of those who either don't believe in the curse or perhaps those who enjoy living dangerously. Rationalists dismiss the Crying Boy curse as pure coincidence, amplified by media hype. Fires are tragically common, and the number of Crying Boy prints sold, possibly tens of thousands, meant that statistically, some were bound to be present in burned homes. As for the painting's survival, fire-retardant varnish and the way objects fall during fires could easily explain the phenomenon. But skeptics also note the role of fear. Once newspapers declared the painting cursed, people began noticing patterns that weren't really there. A burned curtain near the painting became proof. A pet's strange behavior, a sign. The painting became a blank canvas on which people projected their anxieties about fate, luck, and tragedy. Despite rational explanations, the crying boy curse refuses to die. Human beings are drawn to mysteries, especially ones that blur the line between the ordinary and the supernatural. A cheap, mass-produced print of a weeping child should be mundane, yet in the 1980s it became an object of terror. Perhaps it reflects a deeper cultural unease, the fear that sadness and tragedy can be contagious, that despair itself can spread like fire. The crying boy story also reveals the power of mass media to shape legends in the modern world. What began as scattered reports of house fires became a national obsession thanks to sensational headlines. And though the hysteria eventually died down, the legend persists in books, articles, and internet discussions. People still hesitate before hanging a crying boy print in their home. The fear, however irrational, lingers. The tale of the crying boy painting is not simply about cursed art. It is about the way humans create meaning in randomness. Fires happen, tragedies occur, but when they coincide with something eerie or unsettling, our minds weave stories of fate and malice. Whether the crying boy paintings truly carried a curse, or whether the phenomenon was a mixture of varnish, coincidence, and imagination, is ultimately beside the point. What matters is how the story has endured, haunting generations with the image of a weeping child whose sadness seems to spread to all who encounter him. To this day, the crying boy painting hangs in some homes, either as a curiosity or as a challenge to fate. And while many dismiss the curse as a quaint relic of tabloid exaggeration, others cannot shake the feeling that perhaps, just perhaps, the painting carries something more. After all, legends do not endure without reason. Somewhere in the ashes of burned homes and in the haunted gaze of a painted child, the mystery of the crying boy continues to smolder, its fire refusing to go out.